Welcome to this special edition of the Heart of the Mule presented by Taylor Industries. And we're sitting inside the house of Stephen Barrett here. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
And appreciate you opening up your home for us. And we'll go ahead and get started and kind of talk about, how did you come to your relationship with Christ?
I grew up in a Christian home. My mom and dad brought us 4 kids to church every Sunday. And that's, of course, where I heard about it. But, by the time I got to college, let me back up to high school. I started wrestling about halfway through the season my freshman year. My family moved from Massachusetts to California. And only 2 weeks after I started wrestling, the varsity guy at my weight got sick. The JV guy got hurt, and I had to wrestle. And my first match was against the league champion. So as I went out on the mat, my coach said, "Don't get pinned." Those were his instructions. Well, I followed his instructions for 52 seconds. And anyway, that's when I was pinned. But right from the very start, I loved wrestling. And wrestling became the most important thing in my life. By the time I was a senior, I won the state tournament, and then this California state tournament, and then I had a new goal. I wanted to become national champion. So I had a few different offers at different colleges, but I chose Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State had the best wrestling team in the nation. At that time, they already had 27 individual team championships and over 90 individual champions, NCAA champions. So I knew that if I were going to achieve my goal, that was going to be the best place, the best coaching, the best partners, the best tradition. So anyway, I was able to wrestle all 4 years for Oklahoma State. My freshman year, I was Big 8 champ, but didn't place in the Nationals. Then I got a 5th my sophomore year, a 3rd my junior year. My junior year, I went into the Nationals undefeated, ranked first, seeded first all year long, and somehow managed to lose a match in the quarterfinals. Came back, took 3rd. But for me, that was the biggest, up until that point in my life, it was the biggest disappointment I'd ever had, because I hadn't gone there to take 3rd place. But anyway, I had one more year, and my senior year, I made it to the finals. I thought, if I win this match, I'm going to be happy the rest of my life. That would be the fulfillment of a dream, of my ultimate goal. Well, anyway, I win the match, and I'm not sure when the happiness went away, but by the next morning it was gone. And even that to me was a disappointment, because I thought, winning that title of champion, NCAA champion wrestler would somehow change my life, make me happy the rest of my life. But, it really hadn't changed anything. So that helped me to start thinking about my relationship with God, that I'd heard about and grown up with. But wrestling had definitely been the number one spot in my life. And when I wrestled, I wrestled for my own glory. I wanted to be a famous wrestler. I wanted people to look up to me, or somehow through wrestling get attention. But anyway, I realized from that there was something more in life. And that's when I started taking my relationship with God a lot more seriously, and started thinking about things like, the meaning to life, why am I here? And it wasn't too long after that I made a commitment that I was going to live my life for God. I was going to quit living my life for myself, and commit my life to God and my talents, which included wrestling. So after that, I continued wrestling.
Yeah. And kind of just talk a little bit about, and wrestling is just one of those sports where, you have to be so dedicated and so disciplined in so many different areas, whether it be the weight cutting and all the other things. But how has your relationship with Christ affected the way that you wrestled, especially after you graduated from college?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, wrestling, you have to be totally committed to wrestling if you're gonna be good at it, because it's a lot of work. You got to listen to your coach. You got to train hard. You have to eat right, and sometimes, yeah, there's an element of having to cut weight. But after my senior year in college, when I joined Athletes in Action, wrestling team is a Christian wrestling team. These guys talked to me about joining them, and so I continued wrestling with that team. But now my motivation had changed, and I actually worked out a lot harder, and in the end reached a lot higher goals. I ended up wrestling in 15 different international tournaments, representing the U.S. overseas, and ended up making it to the finals of 13 of those 15 tournaments and winning 8 of them. So anyway, my motivation had changed from glorifying myself to somehow using what God had given me to glorify Him.
Absolutely. And kind of talk about, and with the Athletes in Action wrestling team, you kind of have the the good of both sides of not only your faith but in the sport as well. So was it a lot easier to balance both of those, especially with Athletes in Action, just because you were around other wrestlers who were just as committed to their faith side as they were their athletics?
Yeah, it was a great experience being with those guys. One coach of mine was Gene Davis, another national champ for Oklahoma State, but he had taken third in the Olympics. He had wrestled in 2 Olympics. He was just a really, really tough wrestler, and a really solid Christian. So anyway, he and John Peterson, another one of my coaches, Olympic champion wrestler, they helped me not only on the mat, but I really listened to those guys and watched their lives and wanted to be like them, not just on the mat, but I wanted my life to look like theirs. So yeah, and it wasn't just those 2 guys. Those are 2 examples. It was a team, and they helped me so much, not just on the mat, but just to grow as a person, grow in my relationship with Jesus, to help me mature in a lot of ways.
And you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier about, after winning your national championship as a senior, and, kind of the lulls of after winning it, and your attitude was a little bit kind of off. Would you say that was a time in your life where Christ, and your relationship with God was tested?
Yeah, I had to do some real soul searching after that. There was another event that God also used in my life that really helped me. The year after I graduated from college, we got a new recruit, Dave Schultz. And Dave was probably the most recruited high school wrestler ever. While he was still in high school, he wrestled in an open tournament and not only beat, but he pinned the previous year's national champ, most outstanding wrestler. And he did that while he was still in high school. So we were really happy to have Dave, and I stayed on at Oklahoma State as a graduate assistant for another year. So anyway, Dave and I wrestled every day together, starting with September 1st. So we have a match at Oklahoma State, the orange and black match. That's our school colors. The coach takes the best 2 guys at each weight class, makes 2 teams. We wrestle against each other, and then whoever wins that wins a spot on the team. He's the varsity guy. So that year, Dave had no worthy challenger in the room. So my coach said I had to wrestle Dave. Well, I wasn't real excited about wrestling Dave. He was 2 weight classes bigger than me. Plus, at the beginning, I had an unorthodox style of wrestling. I could do my moves against him, but after wrestling him with him for 2.5 months, I didn't have any secrets left, because I not only showed him my moves, but how to defend against my moves. I was his coach. That was my job. So anyway, I agreed to wrestle Dave. The coach knew that if I wrestled Dave that night, that would be the featured match, and they'd get a whole lot more people, and they'd make a lot more, revenue, from this match. So anyway, at Oklahoma State, if you're a winner, they love you. If you're a loser, they don't like you very much. That's just making it. I could give you a lot of examples of that, but that's just the short story. So anyway, that night, when I was introduced that evening, my fans, they loved me. And that night they got up on their feet and gave me a standing ovation when I walked out on the mat. And so the match started, and Dave, he got the first takedown, he got a couple points, and then already, the crowd's starting to root a little for Dave. And then as the match goes on, Dave gets a couple more points, and by the second period, the crowd is solidly behind Dave. And in the third period, I get a hold of his leg, and I'm pulling so hard to take him down that I broke my own rib. And anyway, I've got a big lump, from that to this day. But I didn't stop the match. The ref stops it, and so now I'm laying there trying to breathe, with this rib, and people are starting to boo. Hey, ref, he's out of shape, make him get up and wrestle. Well, there were guys that, when they got tired, they grabbed me, but I had never done that. I'd wrestled in front of that crowd for 4 years. So anyway, I got up, finished the match. Dave won 7-2, and I'd never heard so much noise in Gallagher Hall. And before we even had a chance to shake hands, my coach, the guy I wrestled for 4 years, came out on the mat. He picked Dave up and was parading around the floor of Gallagher Hall with Dave on his shoulders as the crowd just went crazy. Well, you probably know that my fans really didn't love me. They loved the way I wrestled. They loved when I got points for the team. They loved when I won the national championship for the team. But their attitude toward me personally, was indifferent. And they had found another hero, a guy that was going to wrestle for them for 4 years that they could cheer for, and who's going to make points for the team. So it was that night, literally, in my head, I was already tired of wrestling for my own glory because my achievements hadn't given me what I was looking for. And I was tired of wrestling for the crowd. Although I used to love to wrestle for the crowd at OSU, I thought there was no better group of people on earth to wrestle for. But I realized that, they didn't really care about me. And that was when I made the firm commitment. I'm going to use my talents, and I'm going to continue wrestling, but I'm going to wrestle for God's glory. So anyway, that made a huge impact in my life, and a huge difference. And it made me realize, God accepts me for who I am, regardless of whether I win or lose. He loves me as I am, and it says in the Bible, Jesus says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." And literally, I felt abandoned, by my team, my coach, my fans, but I did feel God's presence. So thankfully, God used wrestling in my life really to bring me to himself and to show me the senselessness of life apart from him.
Absolutely. And talk a little bit about, the amount that you have involved yourself in not only Athletes in Action, but also in FCA as well.
Well, I joined the Athletes in Action wrestling team back in 1979. So anyway, I've been with them for a long time. FCA at University of Central Missouri was kind of a natural thing for me to want to get involved in, because in high school and college both, I went to FCA meetings. Now, looking back at all that, I wish I would have paid a lot more attention and actually done the things that we were talking about.
Sure.
But no question about it, it was a good influence on me. But I'm really glad now that I'm living back on my farm here in Missouri, that I've got a chance to be with a group of athletes that, you know, they really care about the spiritual side. You know, they're coming to Athletes in Action to learn more about God, to be more like Jesus in their lives, and to grow spiritually. And so anyway, I'm really glad that I have a chance to be there, grow with them, but also, you know, speaking from experience, to be able to help them in that.
What's the greatest strength that you find from your relationship with Christ?
You know, when you read about, for example, there's a verse that talks about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. I just think that without God, without having Jesus in my life, I wouldn't be able to be closer to those characteristics. There's a lot of distractions in the world, and when I lose my direction, you know, I want my life to be like Jesus. When I am distracted, I just noticed a pattern in my life. Bad things would happen. You know, I would make bad decisions, which led to, you know, bad results. And I just feel like if I hadn't really made a commitment and being like Jesus was my goal, and keeping my eyes on Him, my life would look very different now than it does.
Sure. Kind of and you talked a little bit about some coaches that you had, but talk about some people that definitely helped you grow on your spiritual side of things.
Probably, to me, I'll use John Peterson. He was one of the speakers at FCA there at University of Central Missouri this year. He's been like an example to me my whole adult life, you know, ever since I was 22 years old and first joining Athletes in Action. You know, he's an Olympic champ, and sometimes you see Olympic champs and they can appear to be proud, self-absorbed or whatever. He was such a humble guy, and he was so kind and gentle. Yeah, he was tough on the mat, but he was just a gentle guy, and really had a genuine concern for other people. And you know, if you look at the life of Jesus and how he served, his life was dedicated to serving others when he was on earth. If you look at his ministry, and even when he died on the cross, he died for our sins. That was the ultimate in serving. Here on earth, John was an example of that to me. And so that's kind of how I wanted to be. And so, you know, living in Russia for 16 years, John came over to Russia at least 2 times a year, sometimes 3 times a year, to help me with different projects. Different wrestling teams would come over and he would help lead that. It was great to be around him and learn from him. And I mean, he was just a guy dedicated to serving God, but serving others too.
Absolutely. And just kind of wrapping things up here on the faith side, you have your Bible here. Talk about your favorite verse. Tell us what it is, and you know, kind of what it means to you.
Okay. I actually had my favorite verse written on my mantelpiece here, but basically it says, and Jesus is talking. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, even though he dies, yet shall he live." Or here it's written, even
though we were dead.
Even though we were dead, yet shall he live. Wait. Even though he...
Might be wrong?
No, it's right. I'm reading it wrong, sorry. I am the resurrection and life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. So anyway, it's my favorite verse because it really shows the hope that we have to be with Christ, to be with God for eternity in heaven.
Absolutely, and you've kind of been able to find that not only on the mat, but off the mat as well, and just being able to really use your time and not only, you know, learning about Christ, but giving it off to others.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that'll wrap up this first segment here of the Heart of the Mule presented by Taylor Industries. We'll be back to talk more about wrestling with Stephen Barrett right after this.
I choose to be a champion.
I choose to be inspired.
I choose the perfect fit.
I choose red to experience learning to a greater degree.
Choose red. Choose the University of Central Missouri.
Welcome to Taylor Tidbits here, presented by Taylor Industries. I'm sitting alongside here with founder and CEO of Taylor Industries, Mike Ballard. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what Taylor Industries is and what kind of services and products you provide.
Taylor Industries is a manufacturer of medical products. Our main thing that we do here in this facility is ECG electrodes, which are used to monitor your heartbeat. If you're ever in a hospital or say they do a stress test on you on a treadmill, they're going to have them on you to monitor your heart. We also manufacture TENS electrodes for nerve stimulating. And we custom build machinery to do different things.
You've been gracious enough again to be, you know, a sponsor of Heart of the Mule, which is a show that we've been doing it for a while now, and obviously there's the faith side of things that we've kind of covered a little bit with your business, but there's also the sports side of things. And you mentioned earlier that you're from the state of Alabama originally. I know you
Yes.
moved around a little bit over the years, but
Yep.
Football's pretty big down there, isn't it?
Football is huge down there, especially where I was born. I was actually born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, but I was born on the University of Alabama's campus.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Druid City Hospital is actually on the campus of the University of Alabama. So you could say I was born right there on campus. Parents went to school at University of Alabama. Mom played in the $1 million marching band. But the big influence on me in Alabama football would be my mom's dad. He was dyed or dipped in the blood of Crimson Tide. Paul Bear Bryant, one of the greatest football coaches ever, he and my grandfather were personal friends and knew each other well. Matter of fact, when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother asked me if there's anything of his I wanted. And I said, yes, it's in his wallet. What do you want out of that old man's wallet? He had a pass that Bear Bryant gave him to go into practices, closed practices to the media he could go into. And I can remember as a child being on the practice field. I can remember climbing Bear's tower that only Bear got to go up in, but he would allow us to go up there. And so I have extremely fond memories of Tuscaloosa and watching that grow. And now it's huge.
Again, this is Mike Ballard, the founder and CEO of Taylor Industries. This has been Taylor Tidbits.
Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
Hi, I'm Jason Ketz, and thanks for watching this week's edition of The Heart of the Mule presented by Taylor Industries. If you or someone you know would like to be on the show, email us at theheartofthemule@gmail.com. Welcome back to this week's edition of The Heart of the Mule presented by Taylor Industries. Again, sitting alongside here with Special Assistant Coach of the UCM wrestling team, Stephen Barrett. Stephen, again, thank you for joining us. And talk a little bit about, you were a little bit of a late bloomer to wrestling, didn't start until your freshman year. Just kind of talk about your first introduction a little bit and what kind of the course that changed your life forever.
Well, in Massachusetts, we didn't have wrestling at my school. We had basketball, and anyway, I wasn't a very good basketball player, but I loved sports, so I did go out for basketball. And when I told my coach that I was leaving, he looked up from his clipboard, and I'm not sure if he recognized me or not, but he said, "Oh, goodbye." So anyway, my first day in California at the new school, I came in with my basketball outfit and my basketball shoes, and asked the coach if I could, train with the team. And he said yes, so I started wrestling my very first day at the new school. 2 weeks later, varsity guy gets sick, JV guy gets injured, and I was on the team. I was on the team for 5 matches until finally, thankfully, the varsity guy got better again. But my first 5 matches, I got pinned 4 times in a row, and then my 5th match was kind of a bright spot. I only lost 10-0. But anyway, for whatever reason, I don't ever remember being discouraged. I just remember, oh wow, I love this sport, and really took to it right away.
Yeah, absolutely, and kind of talk a little bit high school career-wise about in 1973 was when the California started the inaugural of the actual state championship system that they still use today, and you were California state champ your senior year, weren't you?
Yeah, my senior year was the first time in California wrestling history that they put the whole state together, all classes, all sections of California, into one large state tournament. There were 800 schools that wrestled. So winning the state tournament was a big deal. And it still is.
Absolutely.
I think there's 1,000 schools that wrestle now in California.
And it's still crazy that they just have the one class. It's everybody. When you're the California state champ, you are the California state champ.
That's right.
And just talk a little bit about your decision to go to Oklahoma State University to wrestle.
A friend of mine and I both won the state tournament that year, so we were kind of like a package deal, John Jackson and I. So we had lots of offers from in the state, out of the state, and then even OSU and OU. So we visited several of those schools and checked it out, but we just loved Oklahoma State when we found out that the wrestling tradition that they had. We didn't even know that. It shows you how isolated we were out there in California, but we found out that they had a dynasty there. 27 team championships. Up to that point, it's 34 now. Yep. At that point, they had over 90 individual champions. It's over 100 now. So anyway, that's after our visit to Oklahoma State, we said that's where we're going. So
kind of talk a little bit about just wrestling at such a prestigious school like that, and kind of the traditions and kind of the bar that's kind of set up high for any Oklahoma State Cowboy wrestler.
Yeah, when my very first match against OU was my freshman year. I'm 18 years old. I had just made the team. Why don't I back up? When I landed at Oklahoma State, we have something called ranking matches. And that's, when you find out who's going to be on the varsity. Well, I was used to winning in California. when the dust settled after the ranking matches, I was 5th string, and there was only 5 guys at my weight class. I lost to everybody. So anyway, it was hard at the beginning. My goal every day when I went into practice, I looked around the room and I picked the guy as a partner, the guy that I least wanted to wrestle, because I knew that's the guy I needed to wrestle if I was going to get better. The guy that was going to just pound on me. So later in the season, a month and a half into the season, I actually made the lineup. So my first match, I go out there and, for OU, there was 7,000, sometimes 7,500 people in the crowd at Gallagher Hall, completely full. There was so much noise when I went out to the mat. The cheerleaders were jumping. The full band was playing. And I tripped on the way out to shake hands with my opponent. And it wasn't just a little stumble. I mean, I went all the way down. I came back up, I shook hands with him, and then the whistle blew, and I just stood there. This guy shot in on me, and there was no reaction at all. He took me straight down. And then after that, I started wrestling. But yeah, it was very different wrestling at Oklahoma State.
Kind of talk a little bit about, the rivalry between Oklahoma State and Iowa. They've had some good battles over the years, and I'm sure you were a part of some of those, weren't you?
That's right. In fact, my buddy and I, John Jackson and I, we both won the first time we had a duel with Iowa, and I think it was our freshman year. We won, but we lost the duel. And it was the first time Oklahoma State had ever lost to Iowa. Now, there had been good duels with Iowa State before that, but Iowa, it was the first time. And Dan Gable had just become the head coach there. And oh wow, our coach was so mad, that we had lost to Iowa. But anyway, it's happened a few times since then.
Just a couple,
Yeah,
right?
but I was there for the first loss ever.
And Gable ended up turning out some national championships at a pretty astonishing rate, just kind of like how Oklahoma State had. And being able to go up against that, good competition like that from Iowa, it really had to step your game up a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah. Dan Gable had a publicity stunt. It was probably my junior year. He said that the Okies stalled. So he created a wrestling mat that covered the whole gym floor. It was 4 large mats put together into one big mat with a real big circle. And so he had told the press that Okies weren't going to stall tonight. They weren't going to get near the edge of the mat. So anyway, right after that, the NCAA got together and they regulated the size. There'd always been a minimum size, but there'd never been a maximum. After that, there was a minimum size. But anyway, I mean, those fans were crazy. I received a standing ovation that night of boos. I beat my guy pretty good, and I got a standing ovation of boos.
Only in Iowa.
Only in Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And kind of talk a little bit about, with your national championship run that you had your senior season, you built up to it, you got 5th and then 3rd, and then you were able to, get it your senior season. Just kind of talk about the grinds of going through that national tournament, and, it makes for one long season. Yeah.
We've got the Big 8s, now it's the Big 12s, but then 2 weeks later was the Nationals. And wow, it was a long season. There were times where we wrestled 30 days we practiced in the practice room 30 days in a row, which meant not even Sunday off. It meant not even when you had a wrestling match. Usually that was a break. Mm-hmm. We had, practice after a match even. Mm-hmm. So yeah, by the end of the season, it was a long, grinding season. But there was still, there's never, in my experience, and I'm not the only guy, there's never been a tournament like the NCAA tournament as far as pressure. There's just this incredible amount of pressure on you. Since then, I've been in Olympic trials, I've been in really major international tournaments. I've never felt pressure like I did in college at the NCAA national tournament. So, and I can't really explain that, but I'm not the only one that said that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, with your your senior season, you've got the trophies up there on the mantle to prove it. But what was it like going out as a senior, being a national champion?
Winning that evening, it was there in Oklahoma, and being from Oklahoma State, it was in Oklahoma City was where the national tournament was. I remember I was being interviewed there were lots of reporters from Oklahoma there because we were right there at home. I was being interviewed, and my older brother was my biggest fan, and he had a t-shirt made up. My little brother is a national champion. And so he had that t-shirt hidden under his normal shirt. And so he went to nationals my freshman year. He had this shirt made up, but he couldn't show it. Sophomore year, same thing. Junior year, ranked first, seeded first. He still couldn't, show his shirt. So when I won my senior year, he jumped over the railing and he's down on the floor parading with this, and he'd taken his shirt off. He didn't even unbutton it. He just popped the buttons, and he's parading around the floor. And so anyway, the referees are asking, the journalists are asking me questions. And one of them says, "Hey, is that really your brother over there?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my brother." And I went to answer the question, and the question that I was answering, and there was nobody around me. They were all around my brother. And the next day was the article in the Oklahoma City paper. It was the front page of the sports section. It says Stanley takes his shirt off was the headlines, and a picture of my brother there. But anyway, winning the nationals to me was just this huge relief because of the pressure. That was the best way to describe it.
Absolutely. And kind of, you mentioned a little bit with getting interviewed after that. You had this nickname in college, Mr. Incoherent.
Yeah.
Talk about how that kind of what gave you that nickname?
It was wrestling was a big sport at Oklahoma State, so we got interviewed pretty frequently, and nobody wanted to interview me because it was hard to get anything out of me. I would just stand there with a microphone and say nothing, and then they'd prompt me, and then but anyway, so none of the reporters wanted to interview me, and one of them finally, he confided in me. He says, "Yeah, we call you Mr. Incoherent."
Absolutely. And after college, you continue to wrestle internationally, and doing some stuff there, and again with the Athletes in Action. What decided to keep on wrestling?
I remember, my goal had been to win the nationals. I didn't really have a goal beyond that. So after that was all over, I remember working out with the guys one day and thinking, I'm the best I've ever been. I'm still getting better. It wouldn't make sense to stop now. So I remember making the decision to keep wrestling, and then I began to have, international aspirations. I wanted to make the Olympic team in 1980. So I wrestled in the trials, and I actually won the trial tournament. And after the trial tournament, Carter made the announcement that we were boycotting the Moscow Olympics. So, and it was tough, but I made the decision to wrestle for another 4 years to try out again. The Olympics were going to be in Los Angeles, where I'd been raised, and I really wanted to wrestle in those Olympics bad, but ended up third in the trials. So only the number one guy goes.
Yeah, and just kind of coming off of your competition days, and now kind of doing some stuff with with UCM Wrestling, being an assistant coach. is it good for you to kind of be able to get back out on the mat a little bit and kind of, rolling around with some guys and giving some good words of encouragement?
Yeah, I'm 60. In June I'll be 61, so I don't get out on the mat with as much enthusiasm as I used to. But for whatever strange reason, I do still like to wrestle a lot. So yeah, I go to the wrestling room about once a week, sometimes twice a week, as like a volunteer assistant. And I love to wrestle around with the guys. I love to show him, some of the moves I used to use. When I've been coaching for a lot of years, so when I watch a guy, I can see some of the mistakes he's making, and I do like to coach. I like to correct, teach, show, how they can do that better.
Absolutely. And,
I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not only, have you been able to coach and do a lot of wrestling stuff here, locally and not only Warrensburg, but in the U.S., but you've also been overseas a lot and been able to coach some teams over there. Kind of talk about some of those experiences.
Yeah, Athletes in Action collects a team or sometimes two teams a year. And living in Russia, I had organized to accept those teams and organize matches for them, tournaments. So I've probably been with, I think over the years, 40 different teams, and had the the opportunity or to lead young men. I really enjoy those sport cultural exchanges a lot. I've seen so many young men come away from there with a much deeper appreciation for where they live, here in America. They've come back a lot better wrestlers. And then also there's been a spiritual aspect to our trips too, and they've come back much more spiritually mature. So anyway, it's been a great experience for them. It's been a great experience for me. I really enjoy leading those teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or helping to lead them too.
Yeah, and being over there in Russia for several years, you lived there as well. Talk about that Russian culture of wrestling, and they really do. They take wrestling very, very seriously in Russia, don't they?
Yeah. My wife and I, our whole family ended up living in Russia for 16 years. A lot of times when I was younger, we just thought the Soviet Union was Russians, they're Russians. Well, it turns out there's probably somewhere around 50 different ethnic groups there. And the toughest of the wrestlers are typically from the Caucasus Mountain region of southern Russia. And so after living in Russia for 12 years, my wife and I got to actually move down to the Caucasus region. I was drawn to that region right from the very start and wanted to move down there. But in the Caucasus, we have 3 daughters, and there's a tradition, if a guy finds a gal he likes, he gets his buddies together, they kidnap her, bring her home to his house, and then they're married. And so for whatever reason, my wife didn't like that, for our daughters. Sure. So we didn't actually get to move down there until our youngest daughter had gone off to college. But I loved living down there. When you look at a culture where probably a third of the guys that you see on the sidewalk have cauliflower ears, and where most of the guys have been involved in wrestling at some level, and it's a culture that really appreciates wrestling. It's kind of cool for a wrestler to be involved in that, and they're really tough. There have been years. Well, 2 years ago, out of the 8 weight classes in the World Championships, 5 of the winners were from Russia, and all 5 of those guys were from the Caucasus Mountain region.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting how they all kind of come out of that one little area, and they've really been able to establish dominance. And you go down the list of Olympic great wrestlers that come out of Russia, and there's certainly a lot of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just kind of wrapping up here with with wrestling and all that, what has this sport taught you? Not only about yourself, but but how have you been able to bring it all in with your relationship with Christ as well?
There's so much a person can learn from wrestling. There's always, you're always hit with some kind of adversity, whether it's an injury or conflict in the team or with the coach or whatever. There's always all these things that you have to overcome. So you learn to overcome that. You don't think of wrestling as being a team sport, but it's very much a team sport. So I learned a lot about leadership, how important it is for team morale, for you to encourage other people. So there was a lot of things I learned about life, about persistence, discipline, that carry on after that. But some of the most valuable lessons I learned in life were, and I'm sure God used wrestling in my life to show me these things, that there are things that have eternal significance. It's great to have awards, but the Bible talks about awards that have eternal significance to those who love God and those who are committed to Him and living a life that's pleasing to God. So that has always helped me too, putting things in perspective. I still like to train for whatever reason and keep in shape, but next to your physical body, next to your spiritual body, training yourself in godliness, it says in the Bible. How much more important that is, because godliness has significance not only on this earth, but in the life to come. So anyway, there's a lot of things, a lot of lessons to be learned in sport that have spiritual significance also.
Absolutely. And again, Stephen, I deeply appreciate you opening up your home to us and allowing us to come here and really get your side of things from an advisor standpoint with FCA, and you're involved with the wrestling team here as well. And so again, we appreciate your time and thank you for joining us.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
And that will conclude this episode of The Heart of the Mule, presented by Taylor Industries with Stephen Barrett. I'm host Jason Ketz. We'll see you next week. Hi, I'm Jason Ketz, and thanks for watching this week's edition of The Heart of the Mule, presented by Taylor Industries. If you or someone you know would like to be on the show, email us at theheartofthemule@gmail.com.